You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Red, amber, green.
Yes. Start with the red, as per usual, Ger. I think, like, Welsh and English rugby both in a bit of bother after
this is my chance now. I can do it now.
This is your chance.
You keep going there.
Let's do it.
Talk amongst yourself.
I'd like to start maybe with Wales, because I think we'll build up to giving out a smack about Eddie Jones, because that's the fun part. So I'd like to leave the fun part to the end. Wales, what do you say about the weekend? 39-34, they lose to Australia. This is an Australia that were under strength, to say the least. It certainly wasn't their starting 15. 26 unanswered points during the last 22 minutes of that game conceded by Wales. A 9th defeat in 12 tests this year. And as they head into the Six Nations, you're thinking, I mean, Wayne Pivac's gone. Surely he's gone. All the talk is Warren Gatland is coming straight back in. Of course, he was the man there before Pivac. Interim head coach, maybe, 12-month contract. He's the obvious man for the job, and it seems, if the papers are to be believed today, that there are to be meetings with senior Welsh rugby officials that have kind of kicked off after that defeat against Georgia 8 days ago. That was kind of the kickstart of this. You can lose to certain teams, you can't lose to Georgia, and I think it's more the nature of the defeat to Australia at the weekend as opposed to the defeat itself. To concede so many late points and to be so far ahead and to let the team back in Australia, I don't know, there's just something. When Wales play Australia, they just can't seem to get over the line. There's an issue there. There's a mental block.
If it was just Australia, that'd be fine. Like, you'd be like, okay, that's grand. We'll see how this goes in the World Cup. But Welsh rugby has fallen off a cliff. Like, and it's root and branch reform required, according to all of the legends of the game who are writing the papers. But like, that's not going to fix things between now and the World Cup.
No. And the funny thing is, Pivac was due to travel to France on Sunday to kind of scope out the 4 pool stage venues for the World Cup for Wales: Bordeaux, Nice, Lyon and Nantes. It feels like a bit of a pointless trip now, because
someone's got to do it.
Well, someone's going to do it and take the notes. But I mean, if I'm Wayne Pivac, I'm burning those notes when I come home and get sacked.
Well, you send somebody with him to take notes too, to make sure.
Yeah. Don't send him by himself. I'm
just looking at the fixtures. Okay, so sorry, Wales Six Nations fixtures. Italy versus Wales, Stadio Olimpico, Saturday 11th of March. Italy are ringing that and we're going, come on, you know.
Oh, 100%. You're Italy, you're licking your lips at Wales at the moment. Every team in the world is licking their lips at Wales at the moment. They're a bit of an embarrassment. Pivac has to go.
Careful now, you're going to end up on Wales Online.
Well, they aren't embarrassed. Like, I don't think anyone on Wales Online or anyone who's a Welsh rugby fan would disagree that at the moment things need to change.
Shane, you could say you're telling it like it is.
There you go, exactly. We should tell it like it is with Eddie Jones as well, Ger, I think, this morning, because...
hang on, we can spend a bit more time on Wales, right?
You want to stick the boot into Wales?
Well, I just think that, like, it's sad. You know, it's sad.
Go on, tell me why it's sad.
Well, that great red jersey, it was, you know, the teams that inspired almost all the world to take up rugby by scoring those length of the field tries. You know?
Sorry, but
where has the romance gone, Shane?
A kick of the ball away from a Grand Slam. They win a Six Nations title. They beat the South Africans in South Africa. So you're thinking, all is well in Welsh rugby, and then shit hits the fan when it comes to November internationals, especially. And you're like, well, how does it actually materialise that they can be so good in last year's Six Nations and then so crap in November?
Where do they go from here?
Where do they go from here, essentially? But when's the best time to let go of a manager?
I don't know. I mean, Wales have got a track record of sacking coaches this distance out from a World Cup and it actually having an impact. So we'll see. I mean, I didn't think Pivac was great, but then obviously things improved slightly and then they seem to have regressed again. I think the Welsh playing pool is so thin at the moment that it's very difficult for anybody to have any level of consistency. And here's the thing, if everybody gets fit for the World Cup, they'll still go deep and they'll still cause trouble for people. It's just whether or not, and also they're on the easy side of the draw, as we all know, it's just whether or not the enough players are fit and in form. So Gatland could come in and restore some order, and you would say that could have an impact, but it might not be cause and effect. It might just be that he gets a little bit more lucky with injuries. Yeah. Also, his experience is at the very high end of international rugby. So, I mean, it's a bit of a shot to nothing for Gatland. It would suggest that his dreams of coaching the All Blacks are gone. And I know he hasn't really been mentioned in dispatches around that post. since he went back down to New Zealand and things didn't work out properly for him there. But like Gatland back in the Six Nations, you know, lobbing grenades at us for
we'll
randomly, you'd be like, yeah, okay. You know, Andy Farrell seems less likely to interact with that than some of our previous coaching tickets.
Yeah,
I shall leave it at that.
Yeah, I think if you're a neutral or an Irish rugby fan, you kind of want Warren Gatland back in. It's a bit of crack, and if one thing determined what his previous tenure at Wales was about, it was consistency, and that is the one thing that they do not have at the moment, is consistency in results. They're just, every now and again they'll pop up with a pretty good performance, and then they'll have a Georgia or an Australia where they look like they're on fire, and then they just let Australia back into the game. Like you're looking at club results, like Cardiff beating the Sharks 35-0 in South Africa at the weekend in the URC. You're thinking, okay, well that's a really positive sign for Welsh rugby, because that came out of the blue, but at international level it's just not materialising. And one win in the autumn series is a bit of a damning indictment, I think, of Wayne Pivac. We're talking here, you know, as if there's any chance in the world, you know, will he stay, will he go? He's gone. Wayne Pivac will be gone. You'd imagine it's just a matter of when. I don't think you should hold on to a man. Like, you want the manager who's in charge of the Six Nations to be in charge of the World Cup as well. You can't go into the Six Nations now with Pivac, have a poor enough Six Nations, and then expect him to turn it around in time for the World Cup. So I think if they're going to do it, it's got to be cutthroat, and it's got to be pretty quickly.
So don't do it after the Six Nations, is what you're saying. I mean, what?
Well, if you're going to do it now.
Yeah, although I mean, things could get worse. They could win no games in the Six Nations, and then they're like, okay, wait. I mean, we tried, Wayne. We definitely tried to give you every opportunity, and unfortunately, it hasn't worked for us. Anyway, look, Sir Clive, right?
Yeah, you want to get on to England.
Eddie's last chance. If England lose next match, Jones must go. But the next match is like the first match of the Six Nations. So,
yeah, that's too long.
Well, it's a strange time to do it, you know? That doesn't make any sense.
0 sense. So it's a bit of a bizarre one. What's Clive saying?
England are not just losing, they're going backwards at an alarming rate of knots. Yesterday, the RFU released a bland statement confirming their review panel will discuss the autumn campaign. This is the same anonymous RFU review panel that has been in place since 2019. So here we go again. Another year, another review. And then blah, blah, blah. Needs to be transparent. Everybody needs to know who it is. Apparently he had a go at Conor O'Shea over the weekend, but I can't see that in this piece, so maybe it was in a different piece. Since 2019, when Jones England failed to turn up in the World Cup final, you know, having reached the World Cup final, this anonymous panel has conducted 2 utterly pointless reviews. For reasons which have never been explained to me, I have never been invited to participate in any of these reviews. At the risk of sounding arrogant, I believe I am the most qualified Englishman to conduct an investigation. People might read that and think I'm angling for a job. Nothing could be further from the truth. The role as RFU Director of Rugby would have interested me 10 years ago, but that ship has long sailed.
Jesus. I've got the quotes on Conor O'Shea in front of me here as well, apparently from his Daily Mail column over the weekend. I know what it's like to be successful at the top level of international rugby, and I don't see the qualities needed to do that in the leading figures of the RFU. It comes back to Bill Sweeney and Conor O'Shea at the top of the organisation who aren't good enough to be in their current positions. I mean, two-footed. Sweeney and O'Shea are paying the price for not employing a director of rugby. Fair point there, potentially. An autumn this bad has been coming for a while. You can't disagree with everything that Clive Woodward is saying, and I think he has a point on the review process. It's a bit of a...
Does he? I mean, I don't know. These reviews, like, ultimately...
What comes from them?
Well, what's the point of them? What are they trying to do? Right? They're trying to hold the international manager, coach, accountable to a committee generally of amateurs. It's like this really old system. It doesn't make, like, the I don't know. You definitely need some performance management of your elite teams, and it's difficult to find a way to make that work that fits with rugby that isn't just corporate bullshit. And this all seems like corporate bullshit, where Sir Clive definitely doesn't want the gig, but would have taken the gig if you'd offered it to him 10 years ago. And you know what, maybe they're going to read this and go, yeah, you're criticising us. Oh yeah, maybe you could come in and be involved. Maybe that might be a way to do it.
But it's going to go one of 2 ways for him. Either they look at it and say, yeah, maybe Clive's the man, or maybe they look at it and say...
Says, my hunch is that after the World Cup, the new director of rugby will be Jones, and Steve Borthwick will come in as head coach. But Eddie Jones has already been lined up to go and join America for an 8-year. Is that not like? I mean, do we not all think that that's more likely to happen than him staying in England as director of rugby and continuing to take this? Like, does Eddie Jones need this in his life? He probably doesn't.
No,
and I don't think Eddie Jones is doing a great job, but I do think that he's always managed to get a team ready for a World Cup. The other one bit here is, stop talking about the World Cup. It epitomises the cosy culture of English rugby and is a surefire way to keep your job no matter how poorly you perform. But it's all that matters.
He's doing a really poor job, Eddie Jones. This is their worst calendar year since 2008. Looking at their record here in front of me, 6 losses, 5 wins and a draw. More defeats than wins this calendar year.
It's terrible. England and Wales in the mire at the same time. It's really awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a pity for rugby at a global level that these two superpowers just can't seem to, rise above the mediocrity which is constraining their ambition.
You look very upset there, Ger, I have to say.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely don't want them to get rid of Eddie Jones right now. I do not want to see what Scott Robertson and Ronan O'Gara could do in this situation right now. I don't want to see that. That would be not good for the rest of the world.
Great moment for a coach to come in, though, when things are...
Oh, it's amazing.
Things are bad. I mean, you're like, well, this can only go up. Surely. Yeah, so England, brutal. And the boos at Twickenham as well after the game. I mean, the English fans are clearly fickle, but the only game they had any decent performance was against Japan in the November Internationals, and they've been shocking in the rest of it. So
well, they were brilliant for 15 minutes at the end of the game against New Zealand. And there probably is a template there. If you're Robertson and or O'Gara looking at that going, I mean, we could actually play like this all the time, lads, if we just didn't have the constraints. But I don't know. Eddie seems like a difficult character to deal with, and his Jose Mourinho-esque style management of other human beings seems to have worn out. So I don't know.
Sorry, his quotes after the match of the weekend. I don't care what people think. And this is a 14-man South African side that they're losing 27-13 to. Well, you might not care what people think, but I mean, you should. You probably should. So yeah, it's just been poor time for Pivac and Jones. So we also feel very sorry for them here.
We'll have more on this with Alan Quinn a little bit later on. If you are listening on podcast, then you can subscribe to the OTB Rugby feed, and you'll get analysis and reaction to that there.
Will we go to the next one?
Yeah, go.
So red, we have Belgium. I don't know what to say about Belgium. You probably have to talk about Roberto Martinez here as the main problem. I saw a tweet from someone last night where they were kind of comparing Martinez to Southgate. Who was more tactically out of their depth, Southgate or Martinez? Neil Robertson, the snooker player, responding, big football fan, he said both destroyed a golden generation. I mean, it's harsh, but with Roberto Martinez, there's been a lot of critics coming out of the woodwork in the last few days since the weekend. I don't know how we all feel about Belgium, but the Morocco game just was not good. Look, Morocco had the crowd behind them. It feels a little bit harsh to criticise Martinez because he's done good things. They were, world number 1 team in the rankings. They were okay in major tournaments. Knocked out of the 2018 World Cup and the Euro 2020 to the eventual winners.
Beat Brazil.
Beat Brazil. So no silverware, but these are close calls. And you'd imagine Martinez is sitting there going, why hasn't this worked? What's going wrong? You're seeing people like Thierry Henry on the bench as well. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne, his quotes of the weekend were quite interesting, to say the very least. He said they're too old to win the World Cup. This is before the Morocco game. This was an interview with the Guardian last Saturday, and he said, no chance of winning the World Cup, we're too old. That is a remarkable quote to get from your main man during a tournament. To suggest at any stage that you can't win it.
Do you think he means it?
Well,
is it not like a reverse jinx type?
Well, it could be.
Maybe he does. Maybe he does mean it. Maybe Kevin De Bruyne is very straightforward. He has always seemed fairly straightforward.
Yeah. Well, Martinez was asked about the comments in the post-match press conference. I think after the game at the weekend, he said, "This is the first time I've heard that. At a World Cup, players have to speak to the media every day. 90% will be positive, but there are always 1 or 2 lines that don't fit into the context. A player is allowed to wear their view. Maybe it was a double bluff. It's what happens behind the scenes that matters. I don't know. Was it a double bluff? De Bruyne seemed fairly legit in what he was saying.
Jan Vertonghen said maybe we're too old in attack last night after the loss. That's a response.
Maybe the other end of the pitch as well. Martinez is kind of hinting at the weight of expectation. They don't have a Brazil weight of expectation on their shoulders, Belgium. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Nobody's coming in going, Belgium should win this World Cup.
I'd say the Belgian fans are probably thinking it, I'd say the Belgian fans probably thought that this like the golden generation. I mean, that Neil Robertson thing Southgate wasn't in charge when the original golden generation with Golden Balls and his crew were there. He didn't have Wayne Rooney, like the best young footballer in the world, playing for his team.
It's true. He's Phil Foden, one of the best young footballers in the world, and he won't even put him on the pitch.
Yeah.
It's another matter.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later on with Gavin Cooney.
You'd wonder. There's certain teams, and I think Belgium have to be one of those teams in the red because after the weekend, you're looking at them. They were better on the ball than they were against Canada in the Morocco game, but that last pass was just just not there. And there was a fear of losing, I think, as Martinez put it as well. So
I also think Morocco are no mugs. Like,
yeah, they're a good team.
That's the thing. There's been this. We keep talking about this in the tier that we're in. There's no shy teams anymore. No. Basically, Robbie Brady said that to David Snade in a piece a couple of weeks ago, and David told us about it a couple of weeks ago, and he's right. Like, none of these teams, they all have, like, Morocco have players who have played in massive games, and they were able to influence in key moments matches against another side who have their flaws. Like, Belgium are a very flawed team. I still don't think they're out, and it's amazing to me that it was Courtois who ended up with the mistake that cost them the first goal, and that's such a key goal. So I still love you, Thibaut. You're still my number one.
You still love him? Yeah, he's quality. But I'm just looking at the group here. I mean, the table is fairly well set in their group, and it's, in fact, to be fair to a lot of the groups, it's going down to the last game in a lot of them. Croatia 4 points, Morocco 4, Belgium 3, and Canada 0. I like that group, and it's Belgium Croatia in the last game.
Yeah,
which would be a decent game. So
you'd assume Morocco will beat Canada, but you don't know. I mean, Canada with nothing to lose, like, they were still at it. Anyway, we'll get on to this now.
Yeah, we might as well. The Amber. So this is Croatia and Canada, and the beef with these two countries is very much real.
This should really be Kevin Caban versus Paul Peschisolido, right? That was the beef of the weekend, where Kev.
Oh yeah.
Where Kev was attacking Peschisolido after Peschisolido came for him, and it was like, screw you, and all of Ireland were like, hang on a second, who the hell are you, Paul Peschisolido?
Yeah, well,
who the hell are you?
He said there were too many British pundits. There was which, by the way, is just a complete dig at Kev, because Peschisolido knows rightly that Kev is a proud Irishman.
Well, there you go. Somebody did go, he's not talking about you, Kev. He couldn't be talking about you, obviously.
Well, he might well have been.
Well, I think he might have been.
And look, we'll defend Kev here.
Screw you, Peschisolido. That's what we're saying. We're coming for you, buddy.
Yeah, screw you, Paul Peschisolido. I was watching.
May the next time you drink the pint of Guinness, may the head be flat.
I watched the Canada game on TSN last night, so I could get the whole Kevin Caban experience. And
totally legal, of course. But
yeah, of course. We're all biased here, but Kev was brilliant. He's a brilliant pundit, and he added to it nicely. And there's a load of Canadian voices on the coverage, and Kev adds that different dimension, the outsider, who's kind of come in and watching a lot of football over there now as well. So I think it needs that. Like, you're seeing punditry, like Maurizio Pochettino was on the BBC at the weekend, and I mean, he's not English, but it adds to the punditry, and he was brilliant, I thought. Unsurprisingly, he's one of the best coaches in the world. But yeah, the Kev stuff was a bit mad. But the great beef that also involved Canada at the weekend was John Herdman versus Latko Dalic, the Canadian versus Croatian managers. So there was a pitch side interview after Canada's previous game to the Croatia one yesterday, and he said, I told them they belong here and we're going to go and fuck Croatia. That's as simple as it gets. And then a Canadian reporter.
Little language warning there for any young ears in the car. It's going to be, in the next 10 seconds, maybe a few F-bombs.
There might be a couple of F-bombs.
You've one job there, go on.
Yeah, sorry, apologies if anyone was offended. But then a Canadian reporter lands into the pre-match news conference ahead of the Canada game, and he was asked for his team's response to Herdman's quotes, and he said he had lectured his opposition ahead of the game, and he used the word in the press conference, respect, the word respect 12 times in his answer. So this was his response. The Croatian team deserves respect from everyone. We respect everyone equally. We expect our opposing teams to respect us. We are worthy of their respect. The Canadians must also have respect for us. This way of putting words together is not a sign of respect. We're the World Cup runners-up from 2018, not Brazil, Spain or other countries. Brilliant. And then Andre Kramaric, who scored the equaliser in the 36th minute and then got a second midway through the second half last night against Canada, said it had spurred Croatia on, those comments from John Herdman. Another language warning for you here in just a second. Picked up his Player of the Match award, Kramaric, and he said, I want to thank the Canada coach for the motivation. In the end, Croatia demonstrated who fucked whom. So it was quite fantastic.
Mafioso style, all due respect.
Yeah.
Anytime anybody's talking about respect, they don't mean it.
Not the beef you expected. I actually saw an interview with a guy beforehand who was wearing a half Croatia, half Canada top. Born in Croatia, 5 or 6 years old, moved to Canada, lived his life there, so he didn't know who to pick, didn't know who to choose. But very much, it's a new international rivalry to kind of compete with USA versus Iran, which we know is boiling up nicely off the pitch as well as on pitch. So,
all right. Shifty Lad says, literally every group stages of every World Cup are not great unless you're involved. It's hindsight that makes you remember the good times. These group matches are very good. Enemies OK Feeney says, definitely been some decent games so far and many upsets. What do people want from the group stages? I'm kind of with you, Enemies OK Feeney. And Aidan Healy says, I've watched 2 full games, England versus USA game being second. I'm never getting those 2 hours back. You got to definitely be careful. If England are playing on ITV, you can definitely swear a bit. I'm not a believer in this, but I mean, it's just causation is not correlation.
England USA was one of the games. It was actually the first game of the World Cup. I said I'm going to go to the pub and watch this one just to get a bit of an atmosphere instead of watching it at home. And myself and the housemate went down to the pub and surrounded by a lot of American fans, and there was one or two tables of English fans, and I was thinking before the game, this is great. We've got both sets of fans here. This is going to get really lively when USA eventually score, and Pulisic gets the crossbar. You're thinking this is going to really heat up, but the game just never took off, and unfortunately we never got to see the beef turn up in that one.
To be fair to Southgate, he never relegated Wigan, which is something the Belgian FA must have never known, says Richard Redballs on YouTube. I don't think Martinez is that bad. I do think that probably should have gone after the last tournament and let somebody else come in, but like, you remember how crap they were in the Euros before he came over, and like we were doing a bit of research ahead of the game that Belgium played against Ireland. They hated the manager whose name just escapes me, Mark Wilmots. The Belgian press hated him. They were somebody was leaking from the squad that Wilmots kept bragging about himself as a player, kind of Glenn Hoddle-esque, you know. Oh, this is what you should all be doing. And it was like peak Hazard, peak Lukaku, peak De Bruyne, and you know, when the centre backs were like only 32, you know, and they could still have managed to. Or is that 6 years ago? So they would have probably been 30. Yeah, I don't know.
But it's funny because like I think there's a lot of pressure on managers in Belgium. Like it's one of those countries where like Ireland, the obsession with the manager and the referendum is constant.
It turns out that that's the case in every team
country
in the world, but like you only get exposure to it. I remember when we were doing the Danish tournament, they were like, we don't think the manager's not doing right, and then they come and hammer us and like, it's not doing with the managers. Christian Eriksen was really good. Like every fan base thinks that the international manager is shite, basically.
Yeah. I was chatting to someone who was in Brussels last week.
Maybe Spain at the moment have found somebody who is their spirit animal.
Yeah, there's all joy for him. I was chatting to someone who was in Brussels last week, and he said you wouldn't know, being in the Belgian capital city, that the country were in the World Cup. There's just no fanfare. There's no like advertisement flags. There's no, I guess, pointed indications that the country's in the World Cup whatsoever, which seems bizarre to me, because I feel like if the Republic of Ireland were in the World Cup at the moment, it would just be World Cup fever everywhere, and you'd certainly know it in the streets. Maybe I'm wrong. But Belgium under pressure. But Croatia Canada had to be in the beef is real. Both in the amber, I think, after the little petty rivalry they had.
All right, green.
Let's get to the green. So France, we're going to go to the first green. The only 100% team left in the World Cup, and rightly so. I think they've been impressive. Kylian Mbappe has been the man of the tournament so far. I don't think anyone can argue with that. He's lit it up. Messi struggling for survival. Ronaldo's bringing controversy with him. Neymar has ankle troubles, and Mbappe is just finding his form, and as he did in the 2018 World Cup, he's just stepping up to the plate with France. So himself and Enner Valencia for Ecuador now the leading goal scorers in the tournament, 3 goals apiece after 2 games for each of them. That's 7 goals in World Cup games already for Kylian Mbappe in his career, which is an extraordinary stat when you consider that only he and Pelé have scored that many in the World Cup before they reach the age of 25. So he's now scored 50 goals for club and country in a calendar year for the first time as well. So, as well as being a danger coming in from the left flank, he's also now banging in the goals. So, kind of stepping up to the whole Benzema being out. France are in a disaster mode before the World Cup. When you're looking at Pogba and Kimpembe and all these guys, and Nkunku as well, being ruled out, you're thinking France's chances maybe aren't as strong as we felt. But after the first 2 games, you have to say they've been probably the most impressive team. We have to see Brazil, of course, in their second game yet. But you're often talking about Mbappe being in the shadow of Ronaldo and Messi the last few years, maybe because he's in the French league, maybe because he hasn't won the Champions League with his club, and he's yet a lot to prove.
He did win the World Cup. He was their best player, most important player when they won the World Cup. So I think that should have put that argument to bed 4 years ago. The Pelé comparison is really interesting, because you do feel like here is somebody who could reach the heady heights of a 3-time World Cup winner, and whatever comes at club level is going to come from a club level. It does make you think, though, that like maybe he's going to make as much money playing for Paris Saint-Germain for the rest of his life and be able to peak for massive tournaments. And there'll be occasional months of the year where he's disappointed that they didn't win the Champions League, but the rest of the year he'll score 50 goals. And did he just decide that, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to be the king of France, and I'm going to try and win the World Cup 3 times and be like, I'm literally the greatest footballer ever, and nobody can argue.
Yeah, and like, there's a lot of pressure. There's pressure in a different kind on France. Brazil are the last team to defend a World Cup from 1958 to 1962. If France could go and do that and become an iconic era team, then that would be the next step. And Mbappe would be the leader in both World Cups, as he's proved so far. They could be on course for an England clash in the quarter-final.
And more to come, plenty of time for him to keep.
Well, exactly. He's got loads.
It has been sensational though. Like it's everything you wanted Mbappe to be able to do. There was definitely a fear earlier in the season when the row was happening at Paris Saint-Germain and the leaks were coming out about how he wasn't trying leg, and he was. I was like, actually, this could end really badly. He's got too much power. It's been a disaster for everybody. But he has arrived and has decided, I'm going to be at it, and he's at it, and it's brilliant to watch. It's amazing. Yeah, and Griezmann's probably the brains behind the operation at the moment. Mbappe's taken all the plaudits and the headlines, of course, but Griezmann's been brilliant in this World Cup so far, in a more understated way. You have Dembele, who's been class. Giroud, as well, has kind of stepped up with Benzema being out. So across the French team, you're looking at someone like Lucas Hernandez getting an ACL injury, and you're thinking that's him out of the World Cup. That's a big blow for them at left back. But his brother just walks into the team, Theo, and completely carbon copy of him. So I mean, they're finding ways to fill those gaps that they had in terms of injuries. And Didier Deschamps just has the team spirit is the thing. And you talk about it with the Brazil team at the minute, because when they're getting off the bus, they're all singing and dancing and playing drums. There's something there. But the French have that as well. And that's something that can be very, very dangerous as the tournament goes on. So I think if France end up playing England in a quarter-final, that would be curtains for England. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. That could be a 2 or 3-0 job, potentially. Well, I mean, you're manifesting there, Shane. I'm manifesting, yeah. Don't be, tempting fate. What's next? Yeah, next up in the green, we'll go to a brilliant weekend for the Irish girls over in Australia. Sinead Goldrick making a little bit of history on the weekend. She's become the first woman to win an All-Ireland Ladies Football title and an AFLW Premiership title. So Melbourne Demons beating the Brisbane Lions in the grand final in Springfield down under. Blocking Mackin as well, the Armagh player who was in Australia playing for the first time this season. What a first season for her as well. And she scored a goal in the second quarter before the crowd. So mirroring that of Zach Toohey and Mark O'Connor, that achievement with Geelong Cats this season. And it now doubles the number of Irish AFLW Premiership title winners. So tips Orla O'Dwyer, of course, winning with Brisbane last year. She was on the wrong side of the game at the weekend, Orla O'Dwyer, unfortunately for her. And of course Claire Jewel-Star Ailish Considine, who was the first two-time winner of the AFLW. But we now have 4 winners in the AFLW season, and Considine and Mackin are 2 key players for this Melbourne team as well, which can't be dismissed. Orla O'Dwyer played well despite being on the wrong side of the game as well. 11 disposals, 2 marks, 6 tackles. But for Goldrick and for this Melbourne team, it's redemption. They lost the grand final to Adelaide earlier this year when Lauren McGee, her Dublin teammate, was alongside her. So really, really good achievement from Sinead Goldrick. And when she looks back in her career now, already All-Ireland Ladies title champion, and she's gone down under and won the big one down there. So, I mean, I don't know when she's planning on coming home, if she's planning on coming home, but you can do it with your head held high now. Small enough crowd, 7,500, which I thought was quite small for a game of that magnitude down under, when you consider the crowds that attend the Ladies All-Ireland football final here in Croke Park. So that was one thing that kind of struck me. But huge achievement for Sinead Goldrick of Dublin and Blaheen Mackin of Armagh. So well done to the both of them. You can see the recruitment drive ramping up again from Australia for Ireland, and I just think it's great for anybody who gets the opportunity to go and see the world. I know that the custodians of the game here will be concerned about the fact that Irish men and women are going to Australia in the numbers that they're going to, but does anybody begrudge them, really? Yeah, and I think in the women's game it's probably more pertinent, because the players you see going to Australia from ladies football are the top players in the country. Very often the Vicky Walls of this world. And they're all having an impact straight away. Yeah. You don't see David Clifford and those types heading off to Australia. Well, obviously Kerry had to map out a career plan for David Clifford, and they introduced a whole campaign around keeping Clifford. Yeah, and you have to do that. In the ladies' game, it's it seems more difficult to hold on to the players for whatever reason. But I'm sure teams are making more of a concerted effort now to keep those players in country. Of course, Blaheen Mackin leaving Armagh was a huge blow to them. They've been coming really good the last couple of years. Goldrick is one of those key players on that great Dublin team that won 4 All-Ireland titles between 2017 and 2020.
Of course, Meath stopping the 5 in a row tilt in 2021, but perfect time she picked to go. Once that 4 in a row was over, she was like, right, let's go.
All right, that was this week's edition of the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.